Welcome to the Sky Therapeutics podcast. I'm your host, Tara Torres, a clinical nutritionist, researcher, educator, and consultant specializing in areas of weight loss, autoimmune disease, gastrointestinal disorders, metabolic syndrome, and other obesity-related conditions. I help clients improve their health through proper functional nutrition, professional-grade supplement protocols, exercise recommendations, education, and support using a personalized, evidence-based approach. At Sky Therapeutics, we offer functional nutrition solutions for chronic disease and help our clients develop sustainable lifestyle habits that will last a lifetime. As a friendly reminder, the information and opinions provided here today is to be taken as general information only, and you should always contact your personal physician or other qualified healthcare professional if you have any questions about your personal health and wellness. Hi, everyone. Welcome to our newest episode where we dive into something a little new. We're going to be doing a special series called Our Client Files, where we interview previous clients about their journey to better health and wellness. So this week we have Danielle Barber joining me, and she is a longtime client, longtime friend of mine. We started our journey talking about hormone health. We dabbled a little bit into her gut health, and really ultimately we're able to better balance her hormones and give her better tools to manage everyday stress. And she's doing so well now. She's thriving. Her journey is just incredible. If you guys could only hear the transformation in her voice and in her mind from when I first met her to now, it has just been incredible to witness. So she did that despite being told by doctors that they couldn't find anything wrong with her. She just knew that something in her gut, something was wrong. She didn't feel like herself, and she became her biggest advocate, and she sought out more answers and different tests. And so we did that for her. So stay tuned. We walk you through that journey, what tests we did, why we did them, what her symptoms were, what supplements and diet we did. And let me know if you guys have any questions afterwards so we can do a little more deep detail later if that is warranted. All right. Welcome, Danielle, to the Sky Therapeutics podcast. I so appreciate you coming and just sharing your story with us today.
Thank you. I'm excited to share my story. This has been a long time coming to share, so I
Yeah.
am ready.
Yeah. So, ladies, listen up. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and all of the things that you do? Because I know you have a big time corporate job, you're a mom, you're a military spouse, you also do some stuff on the side. Like, what
Yes.
do you do?
Um, so I like to stay busy. Yes, so you kind of said a few things. I work full time for corporate America. I also am a military spouse. I am a veteran, full-time mom of two crazy girls that definitely keep me busy. And I run a side hustle and I volunteer. I'm part of the PTO at the school. So yes, I am extremely busy, but I kind of like it that way.
Yeah, I feel like every time I talk to you, you're doing something new and different, always volunteering with your kids' schools, going on trips with your husband, because I know you guys are super involved in the community and different things. So that can
Yes.
sometimes wear you down, though. And I know at one point you were going to school full time, because I know at some point in us talking together, we always kind of went back like down the timeline of events, and we're like trying to figure out when the heck did this start to go downhill for you, right?
Right. Yeah. So I was going to school full time as well of all the other things. And I graduated with my master's in 2018. And then, shortly thereafter, COVID hit. And also in that time frame, my husband got orders to PCS. So we had to leave our home that we had had for 10 years and travel across the United States during a pandemic with two kids and a dog. um, and it just kind of was for me, at the time, I didn't think it was super stressful. But then looking back at all the things that happened in a short amount of time. We sold a house, we bought a house, we moved, all the things, started new jobs, started the kids in a new school, started in a new neighborhood and making new friends and all these things. It finally just kind of hit me. And I guess you could say I was a little stressed.
So what did that look like for you? What were you feeling? Like, what does stress look like for you?
So, stress for me is, and I feel like a lot of women can relate. When you have a lot of things going on at once, well, for me specifically, I tend to get angry. So I get angry and frustrated, and that's not my normal. I pride myself in being this outgoing, positive person. And when I couldn't see anything positive in my life at, that time, um, I knew something was wrong. I knew that there was something wrong with me, and it made me even more frustrated because I couldn't figure it out. I couldn't understand what was happening and why these feelings were happening to me.
So what did you do? Like, what was your first step?
Well, my first step was what I think a lot of us do. We call our doctor. I've had anxiety in the past and I've had depression in the past. I had postpartum depression. And so I kind of saw similar signs. And so I went back to my doctor and I said, "Hey, I think I'm depressed again, or I'm having these feelings and I don't know how to cope with it." And the doctor, what a lot of doctors do, right, is they prescribe you your anti-anxiety or your antidepressant medications. And so that's what we did. And 6 weeks later, I'm still not happy. I'm still frustrated. And so what do? They up the dose. And at that point, I was just frustrated because I didn't feel like it was helping. And I didn't think that necessarily I was depressed. Like I couldn't figure out the root cause. And that's when I wanted to seek different avenues for my health.
Mhm.
And I think that's about the time when my husband suggested, like, well, try maybe a nutritionist. And I just so happened to call you. And I think that's about when we started the relationship. Just talking with you and everything. So
So what were some of the tests that you had done before meeting me? Did they do it?
before meeting you, I definitely had the test, like blood tests and just the normal, like, yeah, what is it? The depression questionnaire. Like, are you having suicidal thoughts? Are you feeling on edge? Are you frustrated? And I mean, I'm like, yes, yes, yes. I'm feeling all these things. Fix me. And the doctor just wanted to throw more drugs at me, and it wasn't helping. And I think at that point too, I was starting to gain more weight. Um, because sometimes medication will do that to you. And I just, I was so unhappy. And I felt like there was something severely wrong with me. And I just didn't know what it was. And my husband, too. I mean, my whole family was affected. And that's what was, I think, the hardest to see was my behavior affecting them. They're like, "This isn't my mom. My mom doesn't usually think this way. She thinks positively." And my husband was like, "We're always such a power couple, a team, and we're not right now. Like, what's going on with you?" And I couldn't talk about what was going wrong with me because I didn't know.
Mhm. So they offered these questionnaires and you're screaming like, "Look at me, look at these red flags." And it doesn't sound like any testing was offered really. They were just trying different medications.
Yes, it was strictly just medications. There really wasn't, like, deeper testing. They
Okay.
weren't listening to me, and you hear that so often, but it's true. Sometimes you just don't get heard,
Mhm.
and that's when you need to become an advocate for yourself, and that's exactly what I did.
Right, right. Well, and unfortunately, I think with the conventional medicine model and the insurance payouts and all of that, I just don't think our doctors are set up to have enough time in the office to cover so many things, you know? At the time, had you had any abnormal blood work ever in your history? Any big red flags in your history to like look at?
Um, no, not that I can think of with my history with like the blood testing or anything. I was always normal, right? And I think again, like that's what was so frustrating was I'm like, there's something wrong. I'm not making this up. So
So let's talk about and like let's lay out some of your biggest complaints. So we talked about a lot of like the mood, irritability, anxiety, depression. Were you experiencing any hormonal issues, like female hormone issues with your cycle or something like that?
yeah, so my cycle was pretty regular, but I felt like I was getting really bloated more often than normal. I always seemed to get a UTI or like yeast infections. I always had issues with that and a lower sex drive. And that was unlike me too, right? So all of these kind of things made me think like there's definitely something going on. And I really did consider that it was my hormones. Um, but I just didn't know what yet. And I didn't know what testing to do.
Right, right. And I remember that conversation with you, which is what prompted me to think, just kind of like listening to your intake. I was like, okay, so she's got some GI complaints. There's definitely some hormonal imbalance happening. What that connection was to your female hormones and stress hormones, they can sometimes all be tied together. So it's like, where do we start? I think what we did was we started you with a detox, right? So we wanted to do like
Mhm.
we did a Dutch hormone test, which is an at home urine organic acids test. That's basically looking at your hormone metabolites and how they get from point A, being your serum, your blood work,
Yep.
to point B, your urine metabolites, and what pathways do they favor? Because sometimes, in the case of our estrogens, you can favor certain pathways that can make you more angry and irritable and crampy and all of these things, and
Yep.
others can be very damaging and lead to cancer, and other we prefer and we want you to go down, right? And same with our testosterones, and we also want to look at cortisol. So it's just a phenomenal test when I get
Right.
moms like you and dad, anybody who has a high stress amount in their life, got a lot going on, and it's starting to interfere with like their sleep and their cycle and their mood and stuff like that. So it's a phenomenal test. You can do it at home, and you did that test. And so we sent that
Did.
off. And while we were waiting, I think we did the detox. We kind of started focusing on the gut. What could
Yes.
we do to clean up the diet? And we did a candida questionnaire on you, right?
Mhm.
So,
We
as much
did.
testing, it can be so pricey. And, sometimes I wish I could order a stool test, a whole bunch of blood work, and a hormone test on every single person to really understand the big picture. But sometimes we got to pick and choose. And so we went with
Yeah.
hormones for you.
We
Um,
did. We did the stool
but
test too. We did do a stool
oh, we
test.
did at one point. Yes,
Yep.
yes, yes, yes. Because
Yep.
I remember seeing, and I think it was because of the Candida questionnaire. And I was going to say, this Candida questionnaire that I have is just so good. And it correlates so well with the higher the score being probability of yeast being present. And yours
Mhm.
was super high.
Yes.
We knew we needed to kind of control right from the UTIs and the signs of bacteria overgrowth. We're like, okay, so something's imbalanced in there. Maybe it's the yeast. So
Exactly.
that was going low carb, but we didn't want to go too low carb because of the
It
hormone picture.
right, and it wasn't necessarily like a low carb as low sugar, right? So we did that was yeah, low sugar was definitely
Yeah.
interesting.
But look how far you've come now. And it's so crazy and wild to see like people's addiction
Right.
cravings for sugar can be so high, can be so challenging to wean you off of it. But it really does get better day by day by day. And once
Yes.
you're out of that craving, you're just like, oh my gosh, how can I ever go back?
You're right. Yeah, it was the detox, I think out of the whole process was probably the hardest. And it was just because it's different, right? And so anytime we do something or we change something, it's uncomfortable. But it was to me, I just kept like looking at the bigger picture, like, okay, I know that this is going to help me, like this is what we need to do. And that first step, the detox, I mean, it was very educational. So I learned a lot about nutritional facts on, reading certain things and ingredients and seeing how much sugar was just in everything, like including, we're talking like sugar alcohols, we're talking, the added sugars. I mean, oh, so much sugar.
Well, and you responded so well to it, if I recall. I
I
mean, a lot
did.
of people will experience a lot of like decreased inflammation and water retention. Their GI tract kind of gets a little bit reset because it's 2 smoothies a day. It's 2 snacks a day, 2 smoothies a day, and a big like dinner at nighttime. So it's not
Hmm.
about being in a deficit. It's about giving your body enough calories and enough
Right.
protein and enough fiber. And that was like my biggest thing for you was like, okay, how can we get rid of the sugar cravings and also change up the types of carbs, right?
Hmm.
Make sure you're getting more complex, high fiber,
Right.
gut
And
supporting.
and it was doable because I wasn't, it's not like I was feeling hungry. We weren't sitting there saying like, "Oh, you can't eat." No, I could eat anything that was on the diet. So as long as the sugar intake was low, or I could eat that, and that was helpful. I think that's what got me through, was there was flexibility in that.
Well, and I tell people it's like a temporary restriction, like hang in there if you can with me, give me a few days, a few weeks.
Yes.
And it's really only 4 weeks. Some people respond,
Yeah.
well, and they want to do it 6 weeks. That was me. I'm the crazy one that did it for 6 to 8 weeks. That's because I was just like rocking and rolling and feeling so good. But that's always something like my negotiation tactic to people is like, yes, it's restricting all of the top inflammatory foods, right? So like, yes, you want
Mhm.
all the nutrients your body needs to detox, but like also how can we eliminate any potential triggers for everybody, right? So like
Right.
gluten, dairy, all of those things. But then we re-added those in eventually.
We did. Yes,
uh,
we did.
so I feel like your gut health has come around a lot. And then let's talk about like the mood and stuff because we at one point got your hormone test results back and we put
We
you
did.
after working through the gut stuff, right? Because we want to make sure you can digest and absorb and utilize everything appropriately,
Mhm.
right? So then we leaned into the hormone stuff. And so we saw some imbalances there. And we had to start taking some supplements. I think it was your estrogen was favoring like the E3 more estrogenic pathway, right? So we're
Well,
you.
that and, like, my cortisol was topping off, like, peaking at noon and just, like, falling off completely.
Right.
And so I remember when we got the results back, I cried. Do you remember that? Like, I literally cried because I was like, "There is something wrong with me. I knew it. It's not me," and I still get emotional when I think about that because you just it's so rewarding to finally see the results of like, "Oh, no, there's something wrong. Like, this test proves that you're not crazy."
It's a little validating, right? To finally
Mhm.
understand that something's wrong, especially when you have had blood work done and you've been to doctors and you've been told like there's
Yeah.
really no explanation. And it's like, no, here's a different type of test. And this is why people come to us often, is because it's just a different perspective.
Right.
I have your results pulled up in front of me, and the normal cortisol pattern, we see like a spike in the morning, right? So we call that your normal cortisol awakening response. And should be like your natural body awakening. And it's typically early on in the morning. And then throughout the day, it typically kind of goes down, right? So that by the time you go to bed, you're ready to kind of shut down and go to bed, right? And then at
Yes.
night, it kind of rebuilds and the whole process starts all over again. Yours never peaked. So we called it adrenal dysfunction.
Yeah.
And our adrenals are made to adapt to stress. Like that's what cortisol is for. Cortisol is an inflammatory hormone. It's designed to be protective, but we know that in times of chronic unrelenting stress where your adrenals don't have time to bounce back and recover, that they can start to get a little fatigued.
Yeah.
And so there's different stages to that. And so, long story short, when you start to see these abnormal patterns in our lab work like this, combined with her symptoms, it's like, yes, okay, we can in fact confirm your body is dealing with something. And so how do we fix that? And so you and I
Mhm.
had a long talk. So there's definitely some helpful herbs and supplements. We already had the diet going for us, so I felt
Right.
pretty confident in that. Um, Now it's just kind of you looking at the science and the studies and seeing like what herbs and adaptogens can we do to get her adrenals to work appropriately again. And that also meant a big lifestyle overhaul, right? Like stop working out is usually what I recommend. We
Yep.
need her adrenals to calm down. Because what were your workouts like back then? Were you doing like the Peloton hit or anything like that?
I was doing, I think it was a lot more bar. So bar, running, that kind of stuff, a little bit of strength, but not too much. Um,
Running and stuff.
yeah. Yep.
So we had you chill out,
Yep. No working out.
heart rate,
Best,
heart rate down.
best, best part of the diet, right? No working out. Doctor's orders.
But what's wild is I think you had a couple pound weight loss after that.
I did.
Right. And so usually I tell people do a lot of yoga and not like the power yoga, but like the deep breathing meditation yoga, because that stress under pressure and you having to practice that breathing is actually really good
Mhm.
for your central nervous system. So there's always a rhyme and a rhythm to my recommendations. And I'm so glad you trusted the process. So,
Yes.
because a part of working with me, a lot of people are like, oh, she's just going to talk about diet. Like, no, we're going to talk about everything. We're going to talk about
Right.
medications, the nutrients they deplete, the nutrients that they require, side effects. We're going to talk about sleep and stress and exercise. So, yeah. And then we put you on some supplements at the time to
Mhm.
support not just your cortisol, but your estrogens, right? And your progesterone at the time.
Yes. Mhm.
Your estrogens were definitely way, way high, favoring the E3 pathway, which makes you way cranky. So,
Imagine that.
yeah. So I think we had given you FemGuard, right?
Yep.
Wonderful product by Designs for Health, um, which has a lot of different properties in there to help push everything to favor the less estrogenic pathways. Um,
Right.
I think it's got like dim and I always say this wrong, Christine, I think is what it's called. It's got a bunch of B vitamins. Christine is what I'm thinking, and also
Oh,
chia
okay.
seed,
Okay.
and things like black cohosh and like a broccoli blend, which is supposed to be really good for helping with estrogen detoxification. We also saw that you weren't methylating properly.
Right.
And so we wanted to make sure we were supporting that pathway because that's the pathway we want you to go down. But otherwise, you trusted the process, you started the
Yeah.
supplements. And how are you feeling now? What are some of the things that you noticed? Like, what are the biggest changes you saw?
Um, Goodness, well, the biggest change was my mood, right? Like I could literally see the positive again. And I think that's one of the things with like the adrenal fatigue and that it really does mimic depression. But the depression medication's not going to fix it, right? It might mask the issues at hand, but it doesn't necessarily fix it. So now we're like really focusing on fixing my adrenals. And immediately, I think, goodness, probably like 3 weeks after I started the supplements, I started to see like I smiled, I laughed. And again, I get so emotional about it, but it's so true. And my kids were like, "Oh, you're like back again, mom." Like, my husband and I's relationship was back to the way it was. Like it was so good. And he even commented on it. And also like having the support of my husband during this time was so important. In the beginning when we didn't know what was going on, I know that I pushed his buttons and the boundaries and it was hard. Um, but once we kind of figured out what was going on and I had that open communication with him and talked to him about it all, he was able to take a step back and not be mad if I was short tempered because he was like, okay, you're short tempered because of this, and we're fixing this. Like, this is what we're working on. And so that really helped. And so yeah, the medications, the supplements all really helped. Um, Really the mood was like the biggest thing I think for me. And then later on down the road, I would say being able to handle stress as it would come was was way easier.
Right.
Um I also kind of learned to say no to some things to not overload my plate, right? Because I'm really good at doing that. And the other thing was meditation. I didn't really do meditation before, but taking that time to myself, whether it be 3 minutes of just deep breathing, 10 minutes of deep breathing, or listening to a meditation track, something like that, um, you really don't realize how much that helps until you do it.
Right.
And so it was like those little things were really helpful for me.
And I just want to testify to the change in your mood, just in talking to you from when we first started working together to even just a few months in, right? Because a lot of it was still on like the gut stuff. And then we kind of shifted. We're like, okay, well, once we were able to heal the gut, and then we knew that you were going to digest and absorb things, we were able to
Right.
focus on the hormones. And all this happened in a year. And so honestly, I think it happened pretty fast, given everything that you had going on and all the things that we had to kind of tackle in little bite-sized amounts. Like I would say
Hmm.
6 to 9 months easy is probably what it took, right?
Yes.
Um, and it's just incredible to watch the journey and your mental health and just like how your outlook has changed. You're a lot more positive now, and it's really cool to witness. And then, understanding that, okay, I am a little more predisposed to stress,
Hmm.
and knowing where to put those boundaries in your life as far as like career. But yeah, you've come so far. And I think that's always so eye-opening. I know that's something that's near and dear to my heart because it's something I personally experience. We get so caught up in the hustle and bustle of life
Right.
and these demanding careers sometimes where we do have to give more than a 40-hour work week, and
Oh, absolutely.
all the
And us
things that we
moms.
juggle as moms,
Yeah.
as parents, you
Yes.
usually work a 90-hour work week. And it's like, for what? At what cost? Like you can't pour from an empty cup. So please start to recognize the signs when something is off. Go to your doctor. And what's great is I know that there's a time and a place for medicine. This is not to tell people not to take these medications. If you need to take those things, you need to take them. But let's also come up with a game plan to improve the effectiveness of that medication, offset any nutrient depletions that can occur from that, and also address the underlying root cause, because
Right.
you don't want to just slap a band-aid on something. Sometimes people do need those things. They have receptors that just don't work well and they need those medications. But
Yeah, absolutely. And I think too, like there's certain things that I've learned too to do to help now, like keep myself right from going backwards. And one of those things, besides like the nutritional part, but people laugh. I drink decaf coffee in the morning first, right? It was one of the first things that you kind of taught me about letting your body wake up and get those natural cortisol levels, right? And so I drink decaf coffee first and let my body wake up. And then later in my morning, I'll drink my real cup of coffee with caffeine. So it's little things that I do now to prevent me from having to go all the way back to how it was.
once you've experienced that yo-yo with caffeine and energy and just understanding your adrenals, like I'm so sensitive to caffeine now too. Like I can recognize when it becomes a crutch and it's
Mhm.
the intake is creeping up or it's creeping up too soon in my morning. And I'm very quick to nip that so that, I don't have to
Yes.
deal with the consequences later on. So thank you so much for sharing your story. I appreciate it so much.
Absolutely. I want more women.
Somebody.
Yeah, more women need to stand up for what you believe is true, right? Go get checked out, keep asking questions, and keep searching for someone that listens to you. I preach to all my friends now about the possibility of hormonal imbalances, and tell them all the time, like, you just got to keep asking questions.
Trust your gut. Like when you know things, like nobody's gonna know your body better than you, and nobody's gonna be able to advocate better than you for you. So if
Absolutely.
it's wrong, and maybe you're fortunate and you're in a position where they do blood work and there's nothing wrong. There's a lot of different ways to do blood work. Sometimes it's not as comprehensive as we want it. Sometimes it's not on the right day of the month, and
Right.
it can be normal, right? and not be normal in a different form, like the urine. So
Yes.
it definitely matters. We're here to support you. If this is you, please let us know. Let us help you.
Absolutely. Thank you for
We're
having me.
happy and thank you for listening to the Sky Therapeutics podcast with your host, that's me, Tara Torres. If you enjoyed today's podcast, be sure to check out any bonus info and links in the show notes. You can visit us at www.skytherapeutic.com or find us on social media because we love connecting with our audience. Until next time, be well.